The newborn's cleft lip sentenced her to death in the frozen creek. When Nizhoni pulled her blue body from the water, she didn't just save a life, she declared war on a world that measured worth by perfection. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The wind howled through Copper Canyon with a voice that seemed to carry the weight of ancient sorrows. Snow fell in thick curtains, coating the red rock formations in a blanket of deceptive purity. The creek, swollen with winter runoff, churned between ice-crusted banks, its waters dark and unforgiving beneath the gray December sky. Along the western ridge, the Morrison homestead stood like a fortress against the wilderness, a two-story wooden structure with smoke rising from its stone chimney. Inside, the air was thick with whispered prayers and shame. Rebecca Morrison lay in her bed, pale and exhausted from labor, her eyes fixed on the ceiling beams as if searching for answers written in the grain of the wood. Her husband, Thomas Morrison, stood by the window with his back to her, his shoulders rigid beneath his wool vest. Between them, wrapped in a thin cotton blanket, was the source of their anguish. The baby girl had been born with a cleft lip, a split that ran from her upper lip to her tiny nostril. To the Morrisons and their neighbors, gathered in hushed consultation downstairs, this was not merely a physical difference. It was a mark, a sign, evidence of something fundamentally wrong, perhaps even cursed. "It's the devil's touch," old Martha Henderson had whispered, making the sign of the cross. "My grandmother told me about such children. They bring misfortune to the household." Rebecca had wept, but Thomas had grown cold. His dreams of a perfect family, of a daughter to marry well and elevate their standing in the growing town of Redstone, had shattered the moment the midwife gasped. As night fell, Thomas Morrison made his decision. He wrapped the infant tightly, ignoring her weak cries, and carried her out into the brutal cold. Rebecca's protests died in her throat, suffocated by years of obedience and the crushing weight of societal judgment. The path to the creek was treacherous, slick with ice. Thomas walked with purpose, his breath forming clouds in the frozen air. He told himself he was doing what was necessary, what was right. Better a quick end than a lifetime of shame and hardship. Better this than watching his wife be ostracized, his family name tainted. At the creek's edge, he knelt. The water roared below, angry and cold. For a moment, just a moment, he hesitated. The bundle in his arms shifted. A tiny hand emerged, fingers splayed against the fabric, so perfectly formed, except for that one terrible flaw above. "God forgive me," he whispered, and let go. The bundle hit the water with barely a sound, swallowed immediately by the current. Thomas watched it tumble between rocks, disappearing around a bend. Then he turned and walked back toward the distant lights of his home, his footprints quickly filling with fresh snow. But the creek, for all its fury, had secrets. The current swept the baby downstream, yes, but also toward a shallow pool where the water eddied behind a fallen cottonwood. There, caught against the weathered wood, the bundle lodged. And there, the baby's cries, thin and desperate, began to echo through the canyon. Those cries reached ears that Thomas Morrison never could have imagined. A mile downstream, Nizhoni knelt by the water's edge, her deerskin dress protected by a heavy elk-hide cloak. At 23 winters, she possessed the quiet strength of the canyon itself, her long black hair, streaked with the red clay of ceremonial preparation, hung in a thick braid down her back. She had come to gather wintergreen and willow bark, plants that grew near the water even in the coldest months. She heard it first, a sound that didn't belong to the creek's natural song. Nizhoni stood, her heart quickening. That was no animal's cry. That was human. That was a baby. Without hesitation, she moved upstream, her moccasins finding purchase on the icy rocks with practiced ease. The sound grew louder, more desperate. Around the bend, she saw it. a sodden bundle wedged against the cottonwood, partially submerged in the freezing water. Her breath caught. She plunged into the creek without thought for her own safety, gasping as the cold water hit her legs, then her waist. Her fingers found the fabric, pulled. The bundle was heavier than she expected, waterlogged and frozen. But she held on, dragging it back to shore with trembling hands. On the bank, she unwrapped the layers with shaking fingers. And there, blue-tinged and barely breathing, was the infant, a girl. Nizhoni's trained eyes took in everything at once. The too still chest, the split lip, the impossibly tiny fingers curled into fists. She knew immediately what had happened. She had seen the cruelty of the white settlers before, their strange beliefs about perfection and worth. "No," Nizhoni whispered fiercely in her native tongue, pulling the baby against her chest beneath her own cloak. "No, little one. Not today. Not ever." She began the steep climb back up the canyon wall toward her people's winter camp, toward warmth and life. The baby stirred against her heartbeat, a tiny sound escaping her malformed mouth. Not quite a cry, but enough. Enough to tell Nizhoni that she was worth saving, that she deserved to live. The climb back to the Apache winter camp seemed endless. Nizhoni's legs burned with exertion, her wet clothing freezing against her skin, but she didn't slow. Inside her cloak, pressed against her racing heart, the baby's breathing was shallow and irregular, each tiny gasp a fragile thread connecting life to death. The camp nestled in a protected canyon alcove where ancient stone walls blocked the worst of the wind and smoke from multiple fires rose in thin gray columns. As Nizhoni emerged from the path, her cousin Kaya spotted her first. "Nizhoni!" Kaya rushed forward, her face etched with concern. "You're soaked through!" "What happened?" She stopped mid-sentence as Nizhoni opened her cloak, revealing the bundle. "Get my grandmother," Nizhoni said, her voice steady despite her chattering teeth. "Quickly! The baby is dying." Word spread through the camp, like wind through dry grass. Within moments, Nizhoni found herself in her grandmother's dwelling, a sturdy wickiup lined with furs and warmed by a central fire. Shaye, the clan's medicine woman, and Nizhoni's grandmother knelt beside them with practiced efficiency. Her weathered face betrayed no shock at the infant's appearance, only focused concentration. "Strip the wet clothing," Shaye commanded. "Kaya, bring clean rabbit fur. Nizhoni, you must change as well before you catch death yourself." But Nizhoni refused to leave the baby's side. As her grandmother worked, Nizhoni peeled away her own frozen outer garments while keeping the infant close. Shaye examined the child with gentle hands, checking her breathing, the color returning slowly to her lips, the way her tiny chest rose and fell. "She's strong," Shaye murmured, more to herself than to the others. "See how she fights. This one wants to live." Other women gathered at the entrance, some curious, some concerned. Nizhoni heard their whispers, understood their questions. Who was this child? Where had she come from? And the unspoken one that hung heaviest in the air, why had she been abandoned? It was Nashota, one of the elder women who voiced what others only thought. "The white settlers," she said quietly. "They did this because of her mouth." A murmur rippled through the gathered women. They had all heard stories of how the settlers viewed physical differences as curses, as sins, as reasons for rejection. It was so foreign to their own beliefs, where every life carried purpose and every person belonged to the whole. "Then their loss is our blessing," Shaya declared, wrapping the baby in warm rabbit fur. "This child was delivered to us by the water spirits. She is meant to be here." Nizhoni felt something release in her chest, a knot of fear she hadn't fully acknowledged. Her grandmother's words carried weight in the community. If Shaye declared the baby belonged, few would question it. But there was still the matter of keeping her alive. Throughout that first night, Nizhoni didn't sleep. She held the baby against her skin, sharing her body warmth while Shai prepared medicines. The old woman brewed teas from sacred herbs, mixed pastes from roots and bark, and sang songs of healing that had been passed down through generations. The baby struggled with feeding. Her split lip made it difficult for her to create the suction needed to nurse from a breast, even when one of the new mothers offered. But Shai was resourceful. She fashioned a small leather pouch with a tiny hole, filling it with warm broth mixed with crushed pinyon nuts. Slowly, patiently, they dripped the nourishment into the baby's mouth, one precious drop at a time. "She needs a name," Kaya said near dawn, as the first light began to filter through the wiki-up's opening. "A real name, not just little one." Nizhoni looked down at the infant in her arms. The baby's eyes, dark and alert, had opened and were studying her face with an intensity that seemed impossible for someone so newly born. In those eyes, Nizhoni saw strength, determination, a will to survive against all odds. "Ah oui," she whispered, testing the sound. It meant baby in their language, but it felt right, a gentle beginning for someone whose life had started so violently. "Her name is Awi." Shie nodded approvingly. "Awi. Yes, she is everyone's baby now. The canyon gave her to us." Outside, the wind had calmed. The snow fell more gently, each flake drifting down like a blessing. Inside the wiki-up, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the love of women who understood that worth was not measured by physical perfection, Awi took her first full breath that didn't rattle with cold and fear. She would live, and in living, she would teach them all something profound about the true meaning of beauty, strength, and belonging. Winter surrendered slowly to spring, and with the warming days came transformation. Awi, who had arrived as a half-frozen bundle barely clinging to life, grew stronger with each passing week. Her tiny body filled out, her skin lost its bluish pallor, and her cries, once weak and uncertain, became robust declarations that echoed through the camp. Nizhoni had become her constant guardian. Though other women helped with her care, it was Nizhoni's arms that Awi reached for, Nizhoni's heartbeat that calmed her cries. The bond between them was undeniable, profound. The other women noticed it, whispered about it with knowing smiles. "She has chosen you as her mother," Shai told Nizhoni one morning, as they watched Awi grasp at a ray of sunlight streaming through the wiki-up opening. "And you have chosen her." Nizhoni didn't deny it. The moment she had pulled that baby from the creek, something had shifted in her heart. She had no husband, no children of her own, and had begun to accept that perhaps motherhood wasn't meant for her path. But Awi had changed everything. This child was hers in every way that mattered. The spring brought its own challenges. As the snow melted and the trails became passable, more settlers began moving through the territory. Supply wagons creaked along the ridge roads, prospectors panned in the creeks, missionaries set up camps near the growing town of Redstone, determined to civilize the Apache people. It was during one of these encounters that Nizhoni first felt the shadow of the outside world fall across Awi's life. She had traveled to the trading post, a rough wooden building where Apache and settlers conducted careful, often tense exchanges of goods. Nizhoni carried Awi in a cradleboard on her back, the baby secure and content, watching the world with curious dark eyes. Inside the trading post, the air smelled of tobacco, leather and coffee. James Sullivan, the Irish trader who ran the establishment, greeted her with his usual gruff respect. He was one of the few white men who treated the Apache fairly, who didn't cheat on weights or try to push whiskey in exchange for furs. "Morning, Nizhoni," Sullivan said, wiping his hands on his apron. "What brings you down today?" "Need needles," she replied in careful English, a language Shai had insisted she learn. "And thread. Red, if you have." Sullivan nodded and turned to his shelves. That's when the door opened again. Margaret Palmer swept in with the kind of presumptuous authority that came from believing oneself superior. She was the minister's wife, a woman whose mission in life seemed to be improving everyone around her, whether they wanted improvement or not. Her eyes, pale blue and sharp, scanned the room before landing on Nizhoni. "Oh," Margaret said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's one of the Indian women." She approached the counter, deliberately positioning herself between Nizhoni and Sullivan. "Mr. Sullivan, I need to place an order for the mission. We're expecting new families next month." Sullivan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I'll be with you in a moment, Mrs. Palmer. I'm helping this customer first." Margaret's lips pursed. That's when she noticed Awi peering out from the cradleboard with wide, interested eyes. The woman's expression shifted, curiosity, then shock as she registered the cleft lip. "Good heavens," Margaret gasped, bringing her hand to her mouth. "That child, is that the Morrison baby?" The trading post fell silent. Even the flies seemed to stop buzzing. Nizhoni's body went rigid. She understood enough to know this was dangerous territory. Sullivan stepped forward, his voice deliberately calm. "Mrs. Palmer, I don't think—" But Margaret wasn't listening. She moved closer, squinting at Awi. "It is. I'd recognize that deformity anywhere. Rebecca Morrison's baby. The one Thomas said died last winter." Nizhoni's hand moved instinctively to shield Awi. Her English wasn't good enough for this confrontation, but her body language was clear. "Stay back." "Thomas Morrison threw that baby away," Sullivan said quietly, his Irish accent thickening with emotion. "Left her to die in the creek. If this child survived, it's no thanks to him." Margaret's face flushed. He was protecting his family from what? Sullivan's voice rose. "From a baby with a split lip. What kind of Christian teaching is that, Mrs. Palmer?" "You don't understand the burden such a child would bring," Margaret insisted, but her voice wavered. The stares, the whispers, the questions about why God would curse them so. "The only curse here," Nizhoni said slowly, forcing the English words, "is people who throw away children." The words hung in the air like smoke. Margaret's mouth opened and closed. Finally, she gathered her skirts and turned toward the door. "The Morrisons will want to know about this," she said. "They have a right to know their daughter survived." "Their daughter?" Sullivan's voice was ice. "They gave up that right when Thomas tossed her in the water like garbage. She belongs to Nizhoni now." Margaret left without responding, the door slamming behind her. In the silence that followed, Nizhoni felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Sullivan turned to her, his weathered face creased with concern. "I'm sorry about that," he said quietly, "but Nizhoni, you need to be careful. If word gets back to the Morrisons, if they decide they want her back—" "They won't," Nizhoni said with fierce certainty. "Awi is mine. The creek gave her to me." Sullivan nodded slowly. "I believe that. But the law, the white man's law, it doesn't always care about what's right." Nizhoni gathered her needles and thread, her movements deliberate and calm, despite the storm raging inside her. She adjusted the cradleboard, feeling Awi's warm weight against her back, and walked out into the bright spring sunlight. As she climbed the path back toward camp, she knew everything had changed. The secret was out, and whatever came next, she would face it with the same determination that had driven her into the frozen creek months ago. Because some things were worth fighting for, some lives were worth defending, and Awi, with her split lip and perfect soul, was worth everything. News traveled fast in Redstone. By the time Nizhoni returned to camp that evening, the damage was already done. Margaret Palmer had wasted no time spreading word that the Morrison baby, the one everyone believed had died of natural causes last winter, was alive and being raised by savages in the canyon. 3 days later, They came. Nizhoni was teaching Awi to grasp objects, watching with delight as those tiny fingers closed around a smooth river stone, when Kaya burst into the wickiup with urgent eyes. "Riders," she said breathlessly, "4 of them, coming up the eastern trail." She rose from where she had been grinding herbs, her face grave. "The Morrisons?" "Thomas Morrison," Kaya confirmed, "with the sheriff, the minister, and 1 other man I don't recognize." Nizhoni's blood turned cold. She pulled Awi close, the baby cooing obliviously against her chest. Around the camp, people emerged from their dwellings, sensing trouble on the wind. The men gathered near the council fire, hands resting on weapons they hoped they wouldn't need to use. The riders appeared at the canyon's edge, 4 figures silhouetted against the afternoon sky. Thomas Morrison sat rigid in his saddle, his face a mask of forced righteousness. Beside him, Sheriff Coleman adjusted his hat, clearly uncomfortable with his role. Reverend Palmer, Margaret's husband, clutched a Bible. The 4th man carried a leather satchel, a lawyer, Nizhoni realized with sinking dread. They dismounted but stayed near their horses, outnumbered and aware of it. It was Sheriff Coleman who spoke first, his voice carrying across the open space. "We're looking for a woman called Nizhoni. We need to speak with her about a child." Nantai stepped forward. He was a warrior, respected and feared, his presence alone a warning. "Why do white men come armed to speak about a child?" "We mean no trouble," Coleman said, raising his hands slightly. "We're here on legal business. Thomas Morrison believes his daughter was taken from the creek last winter. He wants her returned." "Taken?" The word exploded from Nizhoni as she emerged from the wickiup, Owi in her arms. Her English was strained but clear. "You threw her away, left her to die in frozen water." Thomas Morrison flinched, but his jaw set stubbornly. "That's a lie. The baby died. We buried an empty grave, but we mourned." "You mourned nothing." Nizhoni's voice shook with fury. "I pulled her from the creek myself. She was blue, not breathing. You put her there." The lawyer stepped forward, pulling papers from his satchel. "Miss Nizhoni, is it? I'm Atticus Crawford. I represent the Morrison family. Regardless of how this child came to be in the water, the fact remains she is the biological daughter of Thomas and Rebecca Morrison. Under territorial law, they have the right to reclaim her." "She has a name," Nizhoni said coldly. "Are we? And she is my daughter now." "The law doesn't recognize informal adoption by Indians," Crawford said, not unkindly but firmly. "I'm sorry, but legally, the child belongs to her parents." Shai emerged from the crowd, moving with the authority of her years and position. She spoke in Apache, her voice carrying the weight of tribal law, while Nantai translated. "This woman speaks of laws," Shie said through her nephew. "But what of the law of the land itself? The water brought this child to us. The spirits delivered her to Nizhoni's hands. She belongs to this place, to these people, to the woman who breathed life back into her lungs when your law said she was disposable." Reverend Palmer cleared his throat. "With all respect to your beliefs, ma'am, God's law is clear. A child belongs with her natural parents. This baby needs Christian teaching, proper education, medical care for her condition." "Her condition?" Nizhoni's laugh was bitter. "You mean her lip? The reason you threw her away?" For the first time, Thomas Morrison's composure cracked. I believed she wouldn't survive. It was mercy, not cruelty. But if she's lived this long, if she's healthy, then perhaps..." He paused, struggling with words. "Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps," Kaya spoke up, stepping beside Nizhoni. "You don't get to be perhaps wrong about a child's life." Sheriff Coleman sighed heavily. "Look, I don't like this any more than you do. But Mr. Crawford is right about the law. If the Morrisons want their daughter back, I have to enforce that. I'm giving you until week's end to bring the child to town. If you don't..." He left the threat hanging, but everyone understood. Force would be used if necessary. As the men mounted their horses, Thomas Morrison looked back one more time. His eyes found Awi in Nizhoni's arms, really looked at her for perhaps the first time. The baby gazed back, unafraid, one small hand waving in the air as if greeting him. Something flickered across Thomas's face. Regret? Recognition? Nizhoni couldn't tell. Then he turned his horse and followed the others down the trail. When they were gone, silence fell over the camp like a heavy blanket. Nizhoni sank to the ground, still clutching Awi. The baby, sensing her mother's distress, began to fuss. Shiye knelt beside them, placing a weathered hand on Nizhoni's shoulder. "We will not give her up without a fight." "How do we fight their law?" Nizhoni whispered. "We have no papers, no legal claim." "Then we find another way," Nantai said grimly. "We've survived worse than paper law." But as night fell and Nizhoni held Awi close, singing the lullabies that had become their ritual, she felt the shadows closing in. She had saved this child from death once. Now she had to save her from something even more dangerous, a society that measured worth by perfection and saw difference as disease. Outside, the stars emerged one by one, silent witnesses to a battle that was only beginning. And in the Morrison house in Redstone, Rebecca Morrison sat alone in her daughter's empty nursery, running her fingers over the cradle she had never been allowed to use, wondering if getting her baby back was truly what her heart wanted, or simply what society demanded. The weeks stretched before Nizhoni like a chasm she had to cross blindfolded. Each morning she woke with Awi nestled against her. Each evening she wondered if it might be their last together. The camp buzzed with tension and whispered strategies. Some spoke of hiding in the deeper canyons, others of fighting if the soldiers came. But Shai counseled patience and wisdom. "Anger makes poor decisions," the old woman said. "We must be clever, not just brave." On the third day, an unexpected visitor arrived. James Sullivan rode into camp alone, unarmed, with a white cloth tied to his saddle, a sign of peace. The warriors watched him warily, but Nantai nodded permission for him to approach. Sullivan dismounted near the central fire where Nizhoni sat with Awi. The baby was practicing her grip, clutching Nizhoni's fingers with surprising strength. The trader removed his hat and stood awkwardly, a big man made humble by the weight of what he carried. "I came to help," he said simply. Nizhoni studied him with guarded eyes. "Why?" "You are white. You follow their laws." "I'm Irish," Sullivan corrected with a sad smile. "My people know what it's like to be called less than human, to have our children taken, our ways destroyed." He crouched down to her level. "I've been asking questions in town about legal options." Kaya, who had been braiding nearby, moved closer. "What did you learn?" Sullivan pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Not much that's good, I'm afraid. Territorial law is clear. Biological parents have rights that supersede informal adoption, but..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "There might be a way." Shai gestured for him to continue. "Rebecca Morrison," Sullivan said quietly. "Thomas's wife. She never wanted to give up the baby. He made that decision alone. I spoke with her yesterday, privately at the store." Nizhoni's breath caught. "What did she say?" "She's torn. Society tells her she should want her daughter back, but..." Sullivan's voice dropped lower. "She saw how her husband looked at the baby. The disgust, the shame. She's terrified of bringing the child back to that house, to that hatred, but she's also terrified of what people will think if she doesn't fight for her." "So she is weak," Nantai said, his tone dismissive. "She's trapped," Sullivan countered, "just like you are. Different cage, same lock." Nizhoni looked down at Awi, who had fallen asleep against her chest. What can Rebecca Morrison do? She is his wife. She must obey. Not if she had another choice, Sullivan said carefully. Not if someone gave her permission to let go. The adults exchanged glances, trying to understand his meaning. Sullivan continued, if Rebecca could be made to see that Awi is better here, that she's loved and safe, that taking her back would be cruel, she might refuse to claim her. And if the mother refuses, Thomas has no case. He can't claim paternal rights alone when the mother opposes him. The mother who let him throw her away. Kaya's voice was sharp with skepticism. The mother who was terrified and pressured and grieving, Sullivan said gently. Look, I'm not defending what happened, but I've known Rebecca since she came to Redstone. She's not cruel, just weak. And sometimes weak people can find strength if you show them where to look for it. Shai spoke in Apache, and Nantai translated. The old woman asks, how do we show her this? She will not come here. Morrison would not allow it. Then we bring Awi to her, Sullivan said. Neutral ground. The church maybe, or my trading post. Let Rebecca see what her daughter has become. Let her see the love, the health, the belonging. That is risk, Nizhoni said, her arms tightening protectively around Awi. They could take her then, keep her. They could, Sullivan admitted. But if Rebecca sees her daughter thriving, sees a mother who truly loves her without shame, I think her heart will break the right way, toward letting go. The council debated late into the night. Some called it foolish, a trap. Others saw it as the only path that didn't end in violence. Nizhoni remained silent through most of it, wrestling with terror and hope in equal measure. Finally, Shie spoke with quiet authority. We have 3 days left before the sheriff comes with force. If we do nothing, we fight or flee. Both paths lead to pain. This path, Sullivan suggests, is dangerous, yes, but it offers something the others do not. A chance for peace, for recognition. And if it fails, Nantai asked. Then we have lost nothing we weren't already losing, Shie replied. Nizhoni looked down at Awi, now 6 months old, growing strong despite the challenges of her birth. This child who laughed at ravens, who reached for sunbeams, who knew nothing of hatred or shame. She deserved more than a life spent running or hiding. I will go, Nizhoni said quietly. I will meet with Rebecca Morrison. I will show her what love looks like. The decision was made. Sullivan would arrange a meeting at his trading post in 2 days. Neutral ground with witnesses. Rebecca would be invited under the pretense of discussing a peaceful resolution. What happened then would depend on one woman's ability to see past society's judgment and into her own heart. As Sullivan prepared to leave, he turned back once more. For what it's worth, Nizhoni, that baby is lucky to have you. Whatever happens, remember that. You gave her something her own father couldn't, a chance to be loved exactly as she is. That night, Nizhoni didn't sleep. She held Awi close, memorizing every detail. The curve of her cheek, the tiny scar where the split lip began, the weight of her small body, the sound of her breathing. She sang every lullaby she knew, whispered every prayer, made promises she hoped she could keep. Because in 2 days, she would come face to face with the woman who had given Awi life. And together, they would decide who truly deserved to be called mother. The morning of the meeting arrived wrapped in fog, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. Nizhoni dressed Awi in the finest deerskin dress the women had made. Soft as clouds, decorated with tiny shells that caught the light. She braided her own hair with trembling fingers, wove sage into the plaits for protection and clarity. Kaya and Shai accompanied her down the trail to Sullivan's trading post. They walked in silence, each woman carrying her own prayers. Awi, strapped securely to Nizhoni's back, babbled happily, oblivious to the weight of what approached. The trading post came into view just as the fog began to lift. 2 horses were already tied outside. Nizhoni's stomach clenched. They were here. Sullivan met them at the door, his weathered face creased with concern. "She came alone," he said quietly. "Thomas doesn't know she's here. We don't have much time." Inside, the usual cluttered warmth of the trading post had been transformed. Sullivan had cleared a space near the back, set up chairs around a small table, and there, standing with her back to them, was Rebecca Morrison. She turned at the sound of footsteps. Nizhoni had expected many things: anger, entitlement, coldness. What she saw instead was a woman hollowed out by grief and guilt. Rebecca's dress hung loose on her frame as if she'd forgotten to eat. Her hands twisted together constantly, betraying her agitation. But it was her eyes that struck Nizhoni most. Red-rimmed, haunted, filled with a pain that recognized its reflection. "Mrs. Morrison," Sullivan began, "this is Nizhoni. And this..." He paused as Nizhoni turned, revealing Awi on her back. "This is the baby you've come to see." Rebecca's breath caught audibly. Her hand flew to her mouth. For a long moment she simply stared, frozen between longing and fear. Nizhoni slowly, carefully unbuckled the cradleboard and brought Awi around to her front. The baby, alert and curious, studied this new face with interest. Her dark eyes, her mother's eyes, Nizhoni realized with a sharp pang, tracked Rebecca's every movement. "May I..." Rebecca's voice cracked. She swallowed hard. "May I sit?" Nizhoni nodded, moving to the opposite chair. They sat across from each other, this chasm of pain and choice between them, with Awi balanced on Nizhoni's lap. "She's beautiful," Rebecca whispered, and tears began sliding down her cheeks. I told him she would be beautiful. She is strong," Nizhoni said carefully, her English measured. "Healthy, happy. Her lip..." Rebecca couldn't finish the sentence. "Heals more each day," Shay interjected from the doorway, speaking through Kaya's translation. "We feed her special way. She drinks, eats. In time it will be smaller, but it does not stop her from living." Rebecca nodded, unable to look away from her daughter. Awi reached toward her, tiny fingers opening and closing, the universal gesture of an infant seeking connection. Rebecca's composure shattered. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I should have fought harder, should have stopped him. I held her once, just once after she was born, and I loved her immediately. But Thomas said, everyone said, that she would suffer, that it was cruel to let her live like that." She looked up at Nizhoni, eyes pleading for something unnamed. "Was I wrong? Tell me I was wrong." Nizhoni felt her own throat tighten. This was not the enemy she'd expected. This was a woman destroyed by the very decision they were here to unmake. "You were wrong," Nizhoni said quietly but firmly, "but you can be right now." "How?" Rebecca's voice was small, broken. "By seeing truth." Nizhoni adjusted Awi in her arms. "Your husband threw her away because of this." She gently touched Awi's lip. "He saw broken. I saw perfect. Your people see shame. My people see gift. She was brought to me by the water, by the spirits. She is my daughter now, not by blood, but by choice. Every day I choose her. Can you say the same?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Rebecca stared at Awi, who had begun to doze against Nizhoni's chest, completely secure, completely trusting. "I wanted to," Rebecca whispered. "God knows I wanted to. But I was afraid. Of Thomas's anger, of the neighbor's judgment, of watching her suffer every time someone stared or whispered." Fresh tears spilled over. "You're not afraid?" "I am terrified," Nizhoni admitted. "Every day I fear your world will take her from me, that your laws will decide love is not enough. But I do not fear her face. I do not fear her difference. I fear only losing her." Rebecca reached out tentatively, and after a moment's hesitation, Nizhoni allowed it. Rebecca's fingertip brushed Awi's hand. The baby's fingers instinctively curled around it, holding tight. "She trusts you," Rebecca said, her voice filled with wonder and devastation. "She doesn't know me at all." "She could," Nizhoni offered, though every maternal instinct in her screamed against it. "If you want. We could share?" But even as she said it, they both knew it was impossible. Thomas would never allow it. Redstone would never accept it. The two worlds these women inhabited were too far apart, separated by more than miles, divided by entire philosophies about what made a life worth living. Rebecca slowly withdrew her hand. Awi's fingers released, reaching back toward Nizhoni. The choice, silent but absolute, had been made by the smallest person in the room. "No," Rebecca said softly. "No, she's yours. I see that now." Rebecca's words hung in the air like a benediction and a surrender all at once. Sullivan, who had been watching from near the stove, let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Shai nodded slowly, as if some ancient truth had been confirmed. But Kaya, ever practical, spoke the question they all feared. "Will your husband accept this?" Rebecca's expression crumbled again. "Thomas won't understand. He'll say I'm being weak, emotional, that I'm letting sentiment cloud judgment." She looked at Nizhoni with desperate intensity. "But I need you to know, this isn't weakness. Letting her go is the hardest thing I've ever done. It's also the rightest." "Then you must tell him," Nizhoni said. "He'll never listen to me alone." Rebecca stood, pacing the small space. "He'll bring the sheriff, use the law. He's convinced himself that bringing her back is redemption for what he did. As if taking her from you could somehow undo leaving her in the creek." Sullivan stepped forward. "What if you weren't alone? What if we all stood together?" Rebecca turned to him, confusion and hope mingling on her face. "What do you mean?" "I mean witnesses, testimony. If enough people saw what I saw today, a healthy, happy child with a mother who loves her, maybe we can make Thomas see reason, or at least make the sheriff think twice about enforcing his claim." "Who would testify against Thomas Morrison?" Rebecca's laugh was bitter. "He owns half the businesses in Redstone. The minister is his friend. The town council fears him." "I would," Sullivan said firmly, "and I know others. Sarah Beth from the bakery. She never liked how Thomas lorded over everyone. Old William at the smithy, he's Apache friendly, lost a grandson to tuberculosis and doesn't hold with throwing away babies for any reason." Shai spoke, and Kaya translated. "My grandmother says, the white man's law requires white man's voices. We cannot speak in your courts, cannot be heard in your buildings, but you can. You must be our voice." Rebecca wrapped her arms around herself, a woman caught between worlds as surely as Awi was. "If I do this, if I testify against Thomas's claim, he'll divorce me. I'll have nothing. The community will shun me. But you'll have the truth," Nizhoni said quietly. "And maybe peace." For a long moment, Rebecca stood in silence. Then she straightened, something hardening in her spine that perhaps had always been there, waiting for the right moment to emerge. "When?" she asked. "When do we do this?" "Tomorrow," Sullivan said. "The sheriff expects an answer by week's end. We go to him tomorrow, with witnesses, with testimony. We make our stand before Thomas can rally his forces." The plan took shape quickly. Sullivan would gather his witnesses and request an informal hearing at the sheriff's office. Rebecca would tell Thomas she was going to town for supplies, then meet them there. They would present their case, that Awi was thriving, that forcibly removing her would be cruel, that the biological mother herself opposed the claim. It was risky. The law still favored Thomas. But it was something better than hiding or running. It was fighting with truth instead of weapons. As they prepared to leave, Rebecca approached Nizhoni one final time. Awi had woken, her dark eyes bright and curious. Rebecca looked at her daughter, really looked, and Nizhoni saw the moment love and loss became the same thing. "Will you tell her about me?" Rebecca asked. "Someday, when she's old enough to understand?" "Yes," Nizhoni promised. "I will tell her about the mother who gave her life and the mother who gave her up so she could truly live." Rebecca nodded, tears streaming freely now. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver locket. Inside was a miniature painting, Rebecca herself as a young girl. "So she knows where she comes from," Rebecca whispered, pressing it into Nizhoni's hand. "But more importantly, so she knows she was wanted. Not by the man who threw her away, but by the woman who loved her, even when she was too afraid to keep her." Nizhoni accepted the locket, understanding its weight. This was not just a keepsake, it was permission, recognition, a blessing from one mother to another. They parted at the door of the trading post. Rebecca mounted her horse and rode toward Redstone, toward a confrontation that would cost her everything. Nizhoni climbed back up the canyon trail toward her camp, toward a community that would stand with her no matter what came. That night, the camp prepared for the next day. Warriors sharpened weapons they hoped they wouldn't need. Women cooked food for the journey. Children sensed the tension and played quietly. And Nizhoni sat by the fire, holding Awi close, the silver locket catching the firelight. Shia joined her, settling onto the ground with the creaking slowness of age. "Tomorrow," the old woman said, "we will see if the white man's law has room for the truth." "And if it doesn't?" Nizhoni asked. Shia's smile was fierce. "Then we remind them that justice and law are not always the same thing." As the stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had witnessed Awi's abandonment, her rescue, her rebirth, Nizhoni made her own silent vow. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever the law decided, whatever Thomas Morrison demanded, she would not surrender this child to hatred. Some battles were worth fighting, some loves were worth defending, and some truths were worth speaking, even when the whole world seemed determined not to hear. Tomorrow, they would make the world listen. The sheriff's office in Redstone was never meant to hold this many people. By noon, bodies pressed against every wall. Sullivan and his witnesses, several Apache representatives, including Nantai, townspeople drawn by rumor and curiosity, and at the center of it all, Nizhoni with Awi strapped to her chest. Sheriff Coleman sat behind his desk looking like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. Beside him, Atticus Crawford, the lawyer, shuffled papers with bureaucratic precision. Reverend Palmer stood near the window, Bible in hand, his expression unreadable. The door burst open. Thomas Morrison strode in with the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way, stopping short when he saw the crowd. His eyes found Rebecca standing near Sullivan, and his face darkened. "What is this?" Thomas demanded. "Rebecca, what are you doing here?" "What should have been done months ago," she replied, her voice shaking but steady. "I'm telling the truth." Sheriff Coleman raised his hands. "Everyone, please. Let's keep this civil. Mr. Morrison, you filed a claim for the return of your daughter. These folks have come to contest that claim." "Contest it?" Thomas's voice rose. "On what grounds? She's my child, my blood. The law is clear." "The law is also concerned with the child's welfare," Crawford interjected carefully. "And when the mother disputes paternal rights, things become complicated." Thomas whirled on Rebecca. "You're disputing me, your own husband?" "I'm protecting our daughter," Rebecca said, each word costing her, "from the man who threw her away." The room erupted in murmurs. Thomas's face went purple. "I made a difficult decision in a moment of cowardice," Sullivan finished. "Say the word, Morrison. You were a coward." "How dare you?" Thomas lunged forward, but Nantai stepped between them, his presence a silent warning. Coleman slammed his hand on the desk. Order! I'll have order or I'll clear this room. When silence fell, he continued, Now, I've agreed to hear testimony before making any decisions. Mr. Sullivan, you asked to speak first. Sullivan stepped forward, hat in hands. Sheriff, I've known the Morrison family since they came to Redstone, and I've known Nizhoni and her people for longer. I was there when this baby arrived at my trading post, half dead from the cold. I saw her 6 months later, thriving. I'm telling you, that child has been loved and cared for better than most babies in this territory. She's a savage, Thomas spat. Raising my daughter in squalor, teaching her heathen ways. Nizhoni spoke for the first time, her English careful but clear. I teach her to be strong, to be kind, to know she has worth. She met Thomas's eyes without flinching. Things you did not teach. Sarah Beth from the bakery stepped forward, a stout woman with flour still dusting her sleeves. I've seen that baby, Sheriff, healthy as any I've known. And I've seen how that Indian woman looks at her, like she hung the moon. That's love, pure and simple. Old William, the blacksmith, added his voice. The good book says, By their fruits ye shall know them. Well, the fruit here is a living, laughing baby. That's all the testimony I need. Reverend Palmer finally spoke. The law of God places the child with her natural parents, but he paused, struggling visibly with his next words. The law of God also speaks of mercy, of compassion, of defending the orphan and widow. He looked at Thomas. Your daughter was an orphan the moment you placed her in that creek. The fact that she survived doesn't undo your abandonment. Thomas's confidence wavered. Rebecca, tell them. Tell them you want our daughter back. Every eye turned to Rebecca. She stood there, trembling, caught between the life she'd known and the truth she'd finally found the courage to speak. Slowly, she walked to where Nizhoni stood. May I? She asked softly. Nizhoni hesitated, then carefully lifted Awi from the cradle board. Rebecca took her daughter into her arms for only the second time in her life. Awi fussed immediately, reaching back toward Nizhoni. Rebecca's tears fell onto the baby's dress. She doesn't know me, she whispered. She doesn't want me. She looked up at the room, her face devastated but resolved. She knows her real mother, and it isn't me. She handed Awi back to Nizhoni. The baby settled immediately, tucking her head under Nizhoni's chin. I contest my husband's claim, Rebecca said clearly. This child belongs with the woman who saved her. I won't destroy her life twice. The silence that followed Rebecca's declaration was profound. Even the dust motes seemed to hang suspended in the air, waiting for what came next. Thomas Morrison stood frozen, his face cycling through shock, rage, and something that might have been grief. Rebecca, you don't know what you're saying. You're hysterical, emotional. I'm clear-headed for the first time in months, she interrupted. I've been living in a grave you dug for our daughter. I won't do it anymore. Sheriff Coleman cleared his throat heavily. Mr. Crawford, from a legal standpoint, where does this leave us? The lawyer set down his papers with a sigh. Honestly, Sheriff? In unprecedented territory, when both parents claimed the child, the law was clear. But with the mother contesting the father's claim, advocating for the adoptive party, and multiple witnesses testifying to the child's welfare, he paused. I don't believe any judge in the territory would force this child's removal against her mother's wishes, especially given the circumstances of her abandonment. That's not good enough, Thomas growled. I have rights. You forfeited your rights, Coleman cut him off, standing. The sheriff was not a large man, but authority made him seem taller. Thomas, I've known you for years, respected you, but what you did to that baby... He shook his head. The only reason you're not facing charges for attempted murder is because she survived. Don't push me to reconsider that decision. Thomas's hands clenched into fists. You're all making a mistake. That child belongs with the woman who chose her, Rebecca said firmly. The one who looked at her face and saw beauty instead of shame. Let her go, Thomas. Let me go. We're done. The words hit like a thunderclap. Divorce was scandalous, nearly unheard of. But in speaking them aloud, Rebecca had drawn a line she would never cross back over. Thomas looked around the room at the faces, some sympathetic, most not. He was losing, and he knew it. Pride warred with pragmatism in his expression. Finally, he grabbed his hat and strode toward the door. "Keep her then," he spat. "Keep the broken child and the broken marriage. I'll have none of it." He stopped at the threshold, looking back at Rebecca. "You'll have nothing. No home, no money, no standing. I hope she was worth it." "She was," Rebecca said quietly. They both were. The door slammed behind him. The sound echoed like the closing of a chapter. Sheriff Coleman turned to Nizhoni. "Miss Nizhoni, I can't give you legal adoption papers. The law doesn't recognize... Well, it doesn't recognize your people as full citizens who can adopt, but I can write something." He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began writing in careful script. A letter of guardianship, witnessed and signed. It's not perfect, but it's something. It says that this child, known as Awi, is under your care and protection, with the blessing of her biological mother and the acknowledgement of the law. He wrote for several minutes while the room held its collective breath. Finally, he signed it, had Crawford witness it, then handed it to Nizhoni. "It won't stop everyone," Coleman said honestly. "There are still people who won't accept it, who'll think a child should be with her own kind. But it's a start, and anyone who tries to take her will have to answer to me first." Nizhoni accepted the paper with trembling hands. It was just ink on parchment, but it felt like armor, like a shield, like a promise from a world that had tried to reject them both. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate but sincere. The room began to empty, people filing out with murmurs and backward glances. Sullivan clapped Nantai on the shoulder. Sarah Beth hugged Rebecca, whispering something that made the other woman nod tearfully. Rebecca approached Nizhoni one last time. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted. "Thomas will lock me out of the house by nightfall." "You stay with Sarah Beth," the baker interjected. "I've got a spare room and could use help in the shop, if you're willing to work." "I am," Rebecca said quickly. "I'm willing to do anything." Nizhoni shifted Awi to one arm and reached out with the other, placing her hand on Rebecca's shoulder. "You are brave," she said carefully. "Your daughter will know this, I promise." Rebecca covered Nizhoni's hand with her own, and in that moment, two women who should have been enemies found something else: understanding, respect, a shared love for a child who belonged to them both in different ways. As Nizhoni walked out into the afternoon sun, Awi content against her chest, she felt the paper folded in her pocket. Legal recognition, safety, legitimacy. But what mattered more was simpler and older than any law. She had her daughter, and her daughter had a future. 5 years passed like water over stones, steady, transforming, carving new paths where there had been none before. The canyon hadn't changed much. The same red rocks caught the morning light, the same creek sang its ancient song. But the people were different. Awi ran through the camp with the speed and confidence of a child who had never been taught to doubt herself. At 5 years old, she was bright, curious, fearless. Her split lip had narrowed with growth and care, though it would always mark her. She wore it without shame, just as she wore the silver locket that held the image of the woman who gave her life and the Apache name that gave her identity. She spoke 3 languages: English from the trading post, Apache from her people, and Spanish from the families who had slowly begun settling near the canyon with peaceful intent. She could identify healing plants, track rabbits, and read simple words from the books Sullivan brought. Nizhoni watched her daughter chase butterflies near the creek, that same creek that had almost been her grave, and marveled. Every day felt like a gift unopened, a promise kept. "Mama!" Awi called, holding up a blue feather. "From the jay! Can we save it?" "Yes, little one," Nizhoni smiled. "Bring it here." Footsteps approached from the trail. Rebecca appeared as she did every month, carrying a basket of bread from Sarah Beth's bakery and small gifts, a hair ribbon, a wooden toy, sometimes just wildflowers. She never stayed long, respecting the boundary she had drawn herself, but she came, always came. "Rebecca," Nizhoni greeted warmly. "Nizhoni." As they embraced briefly, these two mothers connected by love and loss. "How is she?" "See for yourself." Awi ran up, breathless and grinning. "Miss Rebecca, look what I found." Rebecca knelt, admiring the feather with appropriate gravity. "Beautiful, just like you." The words came easier now for both of them. The wounds had scarred over, no longer raw, though neither woman had forgotten what it cost to get here. "I brought books," Rebecca said, pulling 2 slim volumes from her basket. "Sullivan ordered them from back east. Stories about brave girls." "Will you read to me?" Awi asked. "I think your mama should," Rebecca said, handing the books to Nizhoni. "But I can visit next month and we'll read together." Awi nodded enthusiastically, already distracted by a lizard sunning on a rock. As Rebecca prepared to leave, she touched Nizhoni's arm. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for letting me be part of her life. I know you didn't have to." She should know all her stories," Nizhoni replied, "the hard ones and the good ones. She is strong enough." Rebecca nodded, tears threatening as they always did. She glanced back once more at Awi, then walked down the trail toward town, toward the life she'd built from rubble, working at the bakery, attending a different church, existing on the margins but no longer in shadow. That evening, as the sun painted the canyon walls gold and crimson, Nizhoni sat with Awi and told her the story, the true one, about the woman who gave birth to her, the man who threw her away, the creek that carried her, and the love that pulled her out. "Why did he throw me?" Awi asked, her small fingers tracing her lip. "Because he thought different meant broken," Nizhoni said honestly. But he was wrong. Different means special, unique, chosen. Like the blue jay's feather? Exactly like that. Awi considered this, then smiled. "I'm glad the creek brought me to you, Mama. So am I, little one. So am I." Years later, when Awi was grown, a healer like Shai, a bridge between peoples like her mother, she would tell this story to her own children. She would speak of the two mothers who loved her differently but equally, of the community that defended her, of the paper that protected her when law was not enough. And she would teach them the most important lesson she'd learned, that worth is not determined by perfection, but by the courage to love without condition, to fight without violence, and to see beauty where others see only flaws. The creek still runs through Copper Canyon, children still play on its banks, and sometimes, when the light hits the water just right, you can almost see the ripples of a small bundle caught against a fallen cottonwood and hear the first cries that changed everything. Some stories are written in ink, others are written in water. But the ones that matter most are written in the hearts of those brave enough to believe that every life, every single life, deserves to be saved. So tell me, what touched your heart most in this story? If you made it to the end, write "chosen" in the comments. And remember, somewhere right now, someone needs to hear that they are worth saving exactly as they are.